program, intended to make investment of $1 trillion US from 2011 and 2015. And domestically, India can generate about half of the fund. But there's a shortage of $500 billion US fund. And if there's some kind of global initiative, mobilize funds from the reserve currency country or reserve rich country to leverage private sector fund like sovereign wealth fund or pension fund to make this kind of cross-border investment, I think that will be a way out. Certainly, ideas there. But again, political leadership. Currently, most national leaders, they look only their own domestic problem. Although opportunity global is there. So under this kind of situation, the chance of protracted global slowdown is very high. And for the developing country, the emerging economies, how to, certainly on the one hand, hope for the best, but it's very important to prepare for the worst. In order to maintain the growth, job, or turn the crisis into an opportunity for future sustainable growth. For this, I'd like to highlight 5 dimensions. Certainly, the emerging markets are not all the same. So the 5 points I highlight is just a framework, and each country can look into the area that they can, mobilize their resources. The first one, I think, emerging countries need to review their fiscal space. Because if there's some kind of dramatic correction in the global economy or shock in the global economy, emerging countries certainly need to have counter-cyclical fiscal stimulus. But we know in 2008, 2009, 2010, many developing countries already engaged around a fiscal stimulus, and now their debt increased. Quite a number of countries, their government debt each year exceeding 4% of GDP. And under this kind of situation, they need to prepare to find areas that they can save, reduce the expenditure, improve the efficiency, and also to identify new areas of source of their revenue in order to create a space for the possible necessity of counter-cyclical intervention. And the second one, they need to identify new driver of growth. Because if you wanted to have fiscal stimulus, you need to use in areas which can create jobs, can generate growth now, but you need to be enhanced productivity in the future. So you need to have those kind of projects ready. In infrastructure, in green economy, in education, you need to prepare for that. So you can have investment-ready project. And the third one is that they need to have some kind of monitoring of their banking sectors. Because in 2008, 2009, 2010, many countries, in their counter-cyclical intervention, they increased the money supply, expanding the credit. And certainly, it was effective. However, in many countries, also turned into the bubble in the equity market and housing market. And if there's some kind of external shock, then there's going to be some kind of correction in those areas, and the bank debt, non-performing loan, may increase a lot. They need to avoid some kind of homegrown banking crisis. So before the crisis hit, they should have some kind of stress test. And if there's necessity, they need to start to recapitalize their banking sectors. The first one, they need to strengthening their social safety net. Because when crisis hit, unemployment will rise, and the government fiscal space has been limited, so they need to well target those vulnerable group of people so they can have a much better effectiveness in their use of their social safety net. And the last one, crisis very often can be an opportunity for pushing for reform, which is not so easy to carry out in a normal time. And for example, in many developing countries, they have a very high subsidies on their petroleum prices. And we know that it can be a very costly to their government expenditure, and it did not really reach the targeted group of people. And with global crisis, the fuel price is likely to drop. And under the current situation, if you prepare well, the government can eliminate those kind of subsidies, and the economy will be much more strong, much more healthy. So those 5 points may be a reference for the emerging market. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lin, for your insights. We have just another 10 minutes left for the close of the session. We can pick up a few questions. So, yes?
Yes. Okay. Hello. I wanted to ask, as the reserve currency for the world right now is the US dollar, and it's expected that the US might go into a certain deflation if demand does not grow, then how is the Indian rupee insulated from that change or fluctuation in the strength of the US dollar? That was one question. Yeah.
Well, who wants to answer it? I think the behavior of the Indian rupee is determined by a variety of factors, some of which are domestic, some of which are external. So if something happens to the dollar, and if the dollar strengthens or weakens, then it is also getting reflected in the rupee. Therefore, there is really nothing that the monetary authority here can really do. If the behavior of the Indian rupee is predicated on the behavior of the dollar. Now, we can really act if the behavior of the Indian rupee is because of certain factors which emanate from the Indian economy, like let's say the current account deficit or capital flows and so on. But the behavior of the Indian rupee is predicated on the behavior of the dollar, or what dollar does in relation to the rest of the other currencies in the world. There is very little that the domestic authority can do. Well, we have an option, in the sense that we can really use the foreign exchange reserves that are at our disposal and so on. But if there is a general strengthening of the dollar or the weakening of the dollar because of external factors, I think we have to take that as given.
Yes. My question is to the last speaker, I think Mr. Lin of the World Bank. What is the difficulty of having a Tobin tax? Because all financial capital, whether it is domestic or international financial capital, has been proved to be speculative in nature. And the only way we can have some accrual for the real economy of funds is through a Tobin tax, or any transaction anywhere, financial transaction, whether it's a banking or international or in the stock market, any financial transaction in the countries as well as international way.
Well, I think that this Dr. Shin should be in a better position to answer this question, because he mentioned about in his presentation. But I can also add a little bit to your question. Regarding Tobin tax is a way to reduce the large inflow and outflow of short-term capitals. And certainly, the possibility to impose Tobin tax in order to reduce those kind of inflow and outflow. Maybe country will be different from one to the others. It very much depends on how open is your capital markets. If your capital account is fully liberalized and also your current account is fully liberalized, under the kind of situation, Tobin tax may not be that effective because they do have other channels to get in their capital into your country. But is there some kind of control in the capital account and also to some extent also their current account? Then Tobin tax may be more effective. Then other countries like China still have a very tight control of capital account. And under that kind of situation, the Tobin tax may not be necessary for the country to reduce this kind of short-term capital inflow and outflow. Would you like to add?
You want to comment?
No, I think Dr. Lin has expressed it very well. I don't have anything to add.
Well, I think the Tobin tax has evolved, just a minute, has evolved into many things. Original suggestion when the Tobin tax was made was with a view to curbing speculative transactions. More recently, people are talking in terms of a tax on financial transactions with a view to raising money to support certain other measures. I think one must make a clear distinction between the two. I think what is now being talked about is entirely different from what the original idea was in relation to the Tobin tax. I myself personally think that the Tobin tax is too blunt a weapon. I mean, it doesn't make any distinction between one type of transaction and another type of transaction. And therefore, to argue that this will have an effect upon speculative transactions alone is not valid. And I would find the imposition of the Tobin tax also very difficult to implement, and it will come in the way of the smooth movement of funds. Yes, one last question actually. Yes. It's all right. Okay.
I think this conference has not so far discussed the burning problems of economy of India. These are runaway inflation, massive indebtedness of the country in a proportion that third of revenue goes for the payment of interest and penalties. And we have also not discussed the falling rate of export because of poor technology of India and poor quality of production. And Finance Ministry, Reserve Bank of India and Planning Commission have done a very poor job in all these fields. In fact, Prime Minister Office issues only the growth rate of 8%, 9%, which are totally false when you go to the countryside, where the people live on subhuman conditions. They cannot be talked of being included in the growth rate. So this conference should do a better thinking so that particular problems of the masses of India and developing countries are looked into. Our institutions are doing only paperwork. They do not go out of the office. This is a sad situation of India.
Well, I don't know whether anybody can respond to what you said, but all that I can say is that your suggestion will be taken by the organizers into account, and organize a special session if you want on some of the issues that you have raised. But these are not, certainly not issues that have not been discussed in India. These are issues that have been discussed in this country for every day and in every forum. We do have problems of rising inflation. We do have a problem of growth slackening. But to some extent, the focus of this conference, or at least this session, has been the impact of what is happening in the rest of the world on the emerging economies, including India. In whatever you be discussed, whether it be in relation to inflation or the slackening of the growth, we cannot afford to forget the fact that the slowing down of economic growth in the rest of the world, the slackening of growth in the advanced economies, has an impact upon the emerging economies, and the emerging economies need to address that issue and take appropriate action in order to come out of it. So that is the focus of this, but that doesn't mean that there are not other issues which need not be looked into. And certainly the issues that you talk about can be looked into. Certainly we are passing through a bad patch in our country, and therefore when you criticize, when you make some strong adverse comments in the context of what is happening in India at the present moment, they may be valid. But I think, and I do hope, that we can come out of this bad patch. It is possible for the Indian economy to achieve, in the medium term, a much higher rate of growth of the economy. The peculiar circumstances in which the economy has slackened during this particular year may not necessarily be present as we look ahead over the next 3 or 4 years. But I do hope that India has the potential and has the ability to come back to a higher growth path very soon. We should be able to achieve a growth rate of 8 to 9%, not this year, may not be next year, but in the following year. Thank you very much.